Universal basic income is the idea of giving everyone a lump sum of cash, no questions asked.
For us, it's really about reconceptualizing how we think about what it means to be human.
Support for this fringe idea had been growing in recent years, and then everything changed.
The coronavirus is the biggest threat this country has faced for decades.
Worst GDP for 300 years. That's the breaking news from the Bank of England.
These are tough times, and there will be more to come.
Thousands of people lost their jobs as the economy crashed because of the coronavirus pandemic, and support for a basic income increased.
That it is an idea that's time has come.
More than 100 UK MPs have called for a recovery basic income to help people in this crisis.
I don't think universal basic income is the right response to this.
So, could this actually work? No one seems to agree on a definition for universal basic income, so we asked Sky's economic editor Ed Conway to help out.
So universal basic income is, well, the clue is in the name. Essentially, everyone in the country, universal, would get a payment, a basic income paid by the government. It might not be very much, but the idea is that could give you a certain standard of living, and if you need to work, you can, but you don't necessarily have to. And there are various different conceptions about how it will work. Some people think that it goes on top of your existing system of benefits. Other people think that it's a brand new thing. You throw out everything at the moment and you have this simple universal basic income paid to everyone.
It is a radical idea, and one that economists have often dismissed as unrealistic, too expensive, and a distraction from actually improving our system.
It is conveyed as though it's a silver bullet that will answer all our problems, and we don't really believe in silver bullets. We need more policy measures than just one to tackle issues like unemployment and poverty and inequality.
The virus tanked the global economy. The UK went into recession, with millions claiming universal credit over the summer.
Chancellor, how are you planning to pay for all of this?
The government has spent billions trying to support people affected by the crisis on things like furlough, the self-employment income support scheme, and the job retention scheme. But some people think that a form of basic income is a better way of helping in the long term.
I mean, in essence, what's going to happen is that people are going to be short of income over the course of this crisis. And we need to make sure that we can inject spending into the economy. And so therefore the reason to have a recovery basic income is to make sure that it becomes easy for people to participate in economic activity, quite simply to make sure that people have the money in their pocket in order to pay for the essentials.
This wouldn't be the first time people turn to a basic income in a time of crisis. In 2012, the city of Stockton filed for bankruptcy. At the time, it was the largest city in US history to do this. And while it started to bounce back, it's still struggling. So, they tried something different.
Starting in February of 2019, we started giving folks $500 a month for 18 months. The cash is unconditional, no strings attached, no work requirements. They can go to the ATM and they can pull the cash out. They can use the debit card as a debit card. They can transfer the money from the debit card to their own bank account. Really full license to do as they wish. Because our recipients are people just like you and me, they're spending the money just like you and I would. We have 40% of track purchases going to food, about 25% going to sales and merchandise, which includes places like Walmart. And then we have about 10 to 11% going on utilities, 10 to 11% going on auto care. Part of what's so compelling about UBI is that you're putting agency back in the hands of those who are experiencing economic insecurity and letting them make the choices for themselves. The economy today isn't working, and so let's use guaranteed income as a way to make our economy more equal today.
In the 21st century, UBI has become a fashionable economic idea, but it's not a new concept. You'd have to go back hundreds of years to find the first significant mention of a basic income. Thomas More published the satire Utopia in 1516 and imagined a world where everyone was guaranteed a basic income. Since then, a whole range of famous thinkers have supported the idea, and in the 20th century it really picked up steam across the political spectrum. People ranging from Martin Luther King to Richard Nixon to famous Reagan and Thatcher advisor Milton Friedman all expressed some sort of support for it. Nixon even tried to introduce a form of it in the US, but the idea was blocked by the Democrats in Congress. So, it's been around for a while, but it's not always been a popular idea.
I've always been a little bit sceptical about a UBI, and that's honestly not because I'm a curmudgeon, although that might have something to do with it. But it's because here in the UK in particular, we already have a relatively sophisticated system of benefits. You've got a very generous kind of national health service. Do you really want to just throw all of that out and replace it with something that is quite blunt, that might not necessarily mean that those who most need the benefits actually get them? Are they going to get less support in the future? And if not, if everyone else is going to get a universal basic income, that's just going to be horrendously expensive. And bear in mind, we're the people who will have to pay for this in the future, whether through higher taxes or inflation.
If a basic income was introduced in a country like the UK, the biggest problem would be the cost. Italian bank Unicredit have estimated that a basic income could cost the UK at least £150 billion a year.
If you look at work that's been done by the International Labour Office, they have looked at different schemes and proposals for UBI and have come to the conclusion that it will cost between 20 and 30% of GDP. And that is, I think, a fairly definitive conclusion about whether or not UBI is affordable.
But despite these criticisms, Stockton isn't the only place to turn to a basic income to solve its problems.
Give Directly is a non-profit organization that was started out in New York and had its first out of New York operations here in Kenya. Our model basically is to deliver direct cash, unconditional, no strings attached, delivered by mobile phones to recipients living in rural villages.
The rural villages of Kenya and the US city of Stockton obviously have hugely different problems. The places Give Directly work in have households who are living on under $1 a day. But both places have brought in a form of UBI.
My name is Dennis. I'm 40 years of age. I'm married to one wife with 4 children. The first transfer, of course, we used to buy food items. Then the second transfer, when it came, then we saw that, wow, this thing we have now to plan. We bought a goat with it, and the rest went for medical care. So I would say that it has really changed my life. One, I'm sure that I'll get medical cover. So, 2, I can get a meal.
The work Give Directly do is quite different to a government-implemented universal basic income. They target specific areas that need help and rely on donations to fund their projects. But what their work does show is that for communities facing economic uncertainty, a basic income seems to improve lives.
Our argument is that we do not know what people suffer most from. If you find somebody living in poverty, you're not the best person to decide how well or how best they can get themselves out of that poverty.
So, what else have we actually learned from UBI trials so far?
Giving them unconditional money once a month gives them security, empowers them, and they feel themselves in many ways better. But we didn't see any employment effects.
The most high-profile trial of UBI so far has arguably been in Finland. It went on for 2 years, costing the government €20 million and making headlines around the world. Kela, the government agency in charge of social security, gave 2,000 randomly selected unemployed people an unconditional €560 a month and watched to see what happened.
They trusted other people more, they trusted institutions more, they trusted politicians more, they were more happy, they had better cognitive abilities.
This is Juha, an entrepreneur who lives in rural western Finland. He was unemployed and on the dole before being picked to take part in the UBI trial.
I felt like I got a letter to the jail that you are again a free man. I would say that it straightly made my stress levels much lower, and I was happy. I feel that it's really like a human right. It's not free money, but it's that the society is taking care of you.
The trial in Finland was the most high-profile basic income experiment, but it also received plenty of criticism.
You really can't extrapolate from the Finland experiment. For a start, they were only giving money to unemployed people, and they failed to get government support to extend it to people who went unemployed. So it's not a basic income scheme, it's something very different, and it only lasted for a limited period of time. And so you can't understand from what happened in Finland, or what anybody thought of that experiment, what it would be like to try and introduce universal basic income into a country indefinitely, which is what it implies. We want this not just for a couple of years, not just for a few people, but for everyone, for the foreseeable future. It cannot be done. It cannot be afforded. It cannot solve the problems of poverty, inequality and unemployment.
But all of these trials happened before the coronavirus. So how would this recovery basic income actually work?
Yeah, so a recovery basic income tends to be proposed as a short-term measure, so a few months worth of basic income payments, or potentially it would come every week. Really, the details of that would still be for government to decide. It's more that people are proposing the tool to be a universal one, and for infrastructure to be put in place that means that we can provide income support to everybody to react and respond to the crisis and how it's going to unfold over the next few months when it starts to become more of an economic problem than a public health one.
Everybody has to be treated in a way that gives them dignity, gives them financial support. And what should be happening now is that everyone should be getting a universal basic income to get them through this. Then we go into that recovery mode. But what I would also argue that the lessons that we need to learn from this is that we need to have a permanent basic income scheme as we come out of this, but there'll be various different stages to it, and government should respond in different ways as we come through this period.
People who previously would have told me it's a nice idea but it's not going to happen, are really seeing this as something that could and should happen now. I think it is very possible that this is the first step towards actually implementing a permanent basic income, rather than it just being a short-term measure.
But not everyone agrees that UBI is the answer.
I think that in a time of crisis that we see an increased interest in something like the basic income because of the way that we describe our society. And we describe it as something that is about individuals using money to gain their independence for themselves. And in doing so, and not being reliant on their community and society, they're sort of doing their national duty. The trouble with that story, of course, is that it's actually not true. It's just a version of that, right? We all love the NHS, and probably many of us know people who are working on the front lines of that kind of service. That is what makes the difference in a crisis. So I understand that for a lot of people faced in this current situation, that the idea of more money individually is superficially an attractive idea. It's not what's going to make the difference in our ability to handle either this crisis or the social care crisis that is still pending ahead of us, or indeed adaptation to the climate crisis.
It's an individualist, monetized solution to a very complicated problem. You can't solve the problems that we're all concerned with just by giving people money.
Money is an abstract concept, but human lives aren't. So the human expense of not having a system that allows everyone to live with dignity, I think massively outweighs the expense of paying for a system that eradicates those problems.
Supporters of universal basic income say it can solve a lot of things. Some say it can help people recover after the coronavirus pandemic economic crash. Others say it can address poverty and inequality. Some even believe it offers a solution to the rise of automation, guaranteeing an income and a livelihood for people who lose their jobs to the machines. But is UBI really the answer to all these problems?
I don't think anybody really wants to be paid to sit at home. And so what we actually need in this situation is a way of helping people create secure livelihoods for themselves.
It's a concept that has many legitimate problems. But most people would agree that something has to be done to help people recover after the pandemic. And the universal basic income is an idea that has captured the imaginations of vastly different communities and governments, and it doesn't seem to be going away.
People who doubt what it can do, just need to get closer to the people who actually received the benefits so that they can listen to what actually basic income does to transform people's lives.
Because you're human, because you're here, you get this income floor so that you're not struggling. And so for us, it's really about reconceptualizing how we think about what it means to be human.
Not a question that we can't afford to do it. The issue is we can't afford not to do it.